What if I told you that something as fragile and ordinary as glass, an item most of us overlook today, was once worth more than gold? In medieval Venice, this delicate material wasn't just valuable. It was the most coveted luxury, the ultimate status symbol, and the very key to power. Those who could craft it weren't just skilled artisans. They were guardians of a secret, wielding the power to shape empires. But why was glass worth more than gold? The hidden tale behind its immense value will completely transform how you see this common material. Picture yourself stepping into the bustling streets of medieval Venice, a city like no other in the world. The air is thick with the scent of saltwater and exotic spices, while the sound of merchant ships unloading rare goods echoes through the stone streets. The narrow alleys are alive with traders haggling, their voices carrying the weight of ancient wealth. Every corner you turn reveals a new face from a distant land, each one bearing treasures from across the globe. But amid all the glittering commodities, one item stands out: glass. Glass was no ordinary item. It was a mystical treasure, a symbol of unimaginable wealth, and a tool used to assert power. It wasn't just a commodity. It was the very essence of Venice itself. Venetian glass represented more than mere opulence. It was a material so rare and valued that only the richest and most powerful could afford it. For centuries, it was synonymous with dominance, both culturally and economically. The secrets of Venetian glass were not just about technique. They were about control. Control over one of the world's most coveted materials. A trade secret that could change the course of history. Venice, with its winding canals, towering spires, and intricate architecture, wasn't just a hub for silk and spices. It was the epicenter of glass-making. Here, artisans didn't simply craft objects. They transformed sand and fire into treasures that shaped the course of civilization. Venetian glass wasn't just an item. It was a symbol of power. The glassmakers in Venice, particularly those in the Murano district, didn't just make luxury items. They created legends that would amaze the world and leave monarchs, sultans, and emperors speechless. But this wasn't just about craftsmanship. The art of Venetian glassmaking was shrouded in secrecy, with every technique passed down through generations and hidden from the world. Venetian glassmaking wasn't something you could learn. It was a mystery to the outside world. Why? Because in an age where rarity defined value, glass had become more than just a commodity. It became a symbol of ultimate power. It wasn't just about the beauty of the glass. It was about what owning or producing it meant in a world where wealth and influence could turn the tides of war, commerce, and life itself. Let's rewind to the 8th century. At this time, glassmaking in Venice was still in its infancy. Early Venetian glass was primitive. Small beads and trinkets used for jewelry or simple household items. The glassmakers of the time were heavily influenced by Byzantine traditions, but the glass they made was far from the masterpieces that Venice would later become known for. Over time, Venetian glass evolved. But the true revolution didn't happen until the 13th century. That was when the island of Murano, in the Venetian lagoon, became the epicenter of luxury glass production. Murano wasn't just an island. It was a fortress of secrets. The glassmakers here weren't just artisans. They were keepers of a sacred craft. The Venetian Republic saw their craft as a form of economic warfare. Understanding that whoever controlled the secrets of glassmaking could control the flow of wealth across Europe. Venice's economic dominance depended on Murano's glass. These artisans were the guardians of this secret. They controlled fire, sand, and alchemy, transforming these raw materials into pure magic, glass that was clearer, stronger, and more vibrant than anything that had ever existed before. The glassmakers of Murano created masterpieces. Mirrors so polished they were thought to have magical properties. Goblets so delicate that they seemed to float in the air, and chandeliers so intricate that they could dazzle the courts of kings and queens. These objects were no longer just commodities. They were luxury, works of art crafted for elite rulers, with each piece having the potential to make its owner seem divinely favored. In 1291, the Venetian government took a bold step to secure its monopoly. It moved all glass production to the isolated island of Murano. This wasn't just about fire prevention. It was about total control. The Venetian Republic realized that control over glassmaking would allow them to hold the economic and political balance of power. By isolating the artisans on Murano, the government created a fortress of secrets, a place where the techniques of glassmaking were locked away, never to be shared with outsiders. The artisans of Murano weren't just skilled workers. They were living treasures worth more than gold. Their hands became more valuable than anything else in Venice, and families of artisans began to form dynasties, each one guarding its own secret formulas for colors, clarity, and durability. Murano's workshops weren't just workplaces, they were hallowed ground, places where tradition and mysticism collided. As night fell, the glow from their furnaces lit up the entire lagoon like a second dawn, casting eerie, fiery shadows across the water. From these furnaces came glass so fine it seemed to catch the very light of the heavens themselves. Venetian glassmakers mastered techniques that had never been seen before. They discovered how to blend metal oxides into glass, producing vivid colors like deep cobalt blues, emerald greens, and ruby reds. These colors weren't just rare. They were irreplaceable. One of the greatest breakthroughs in Venetian glassmaking was the invention of cristallo, a glass so clear it was considered divine. For the first time in history, artisans could create glass that wasn't just functional, but breathtakingly beautiful. Cristallo refracted candlelight like liquid ice, making the glass glow with a purity never before seen. This creation of cristallo catapulted Venetian glass into a new era, where it wasn't just an object of desire, it was a symbol of the divine. Venetian glass became the most coveted material in the world, a luxury that no one could replicate. In an era when much of Europe still drank from rough pewter or wooden vessels, Venice offered goblets that seemed to glow in the light. Murano's artisans weren't just making functional objects, they were creating luxury. Goblets with delicately thin stems, bowls that glimmered with veins of color like precious stones, and vases twisted into shapes that seemed to defy nature. All of these became status symbols, representing the very height of refinement. Venetian artisans weren't just known for their goblets. They pioneered mirrors, an item so rare and mystical that owning one was a symbol of extraordinary wealth. A single mirror could cost as much as a noble's estate. Chandeliers, dripping with crystal droplets, illuminated the halls of the richest families in Europe. Colored glass beads, too, became prized adornments, traded far and wide, even reaching Africa and the New World. Venetian glass wasn't just a luxury. It was a statement. It was a symbol of power, of dominion over not just materials, but people and history itself. The glassmakers of Murano had turned fragility into fortunes. By the late Middle Ages, Venetian glass was the most profitable export in the city's booming economy. The profit margins were extraordinary. Raw materials like sand and soda ash were inexpensive, but once transformed in Murano's furnaces, the glass was worth as much as silver or gold. Venetian glass wasn't just a luxury.